When we picture castles, we often imagine fairy tale towers, glittering halls, and noble feasts fit for kings and queens. But the truth is far less glamorous. Life inside a medieval castle was not about luxury. It was about survival. The towering stone walls that look so majestic today were cold, damp, and unforgiving. They trapped in the chill of winter and the musty smell of smoke from fires that never seemed to warm more than a few feet around them. Privacy, something we take for granted now, was almost non-existent. Servants, guards, and family members often lived packed together, sharing spaces where noise and tension never ended. Even nobles, who were meant to live in comfort, dealt with drafty rooms, hard beds stuffed with straw, and the constant dripping of water through leaky ceilings. The grandeur we see from the outside was mostly for show, a symbol of power and strength rather than true comfort. The castle was a fortress first, a home second, and that meant daily life inside was far more difficult than the romantic stories ever reveal. The reality is, for those who lived within those walls, the dream was often closer to a nightmare. If you think castles were spotless palaces where everything gleamed, think again. Hygiene was one of the biggest struggles of castle life, and the filth was unavoidable. Most castles didn't have anything close to modern plumbing and instead relied on simple chutes called garderobes, basically holes in the walls where waste dropped straight into the moat or courtyard below. Imagine the stench during summer when the smell of human waste mixed with rotting food and stagnant water. Chamber parts were often emptied into hallways or out of windows, sometimes landing right where people walk. Servants were tasked with cleaning, but with hundreds of people living inside the same walls, keeping things sanitary was impossible. Rats and insects thrived in this environment, carrying fleas and spreading disease that could sweep through the castle in no time. Even in the great halls where nobles dined, floors were covered with straw to soak up spills, scraps, and whatever else fell during the feast. After a few days, that straw turned into a filthy, pest-filled carpet for all the wealth and power that castles symbolized. The truth is they were some of the dirtiest, smelliest places to live, and no amount of stone walls could hide that reality. Food in a castle might sound like a never-ending banquet, but the reality was far from it. Yes, nobles occasionally enjoyed lavish feasts with roasted meats, spiced wine, and exotic dishes to impress their guests, but those moments were rare and reserved for special occasions. Day-to-day meals were often repetitive, bland, and heavily reliant on bread, porridge, and ale. Fresh fruits and vegetables were difficult to come by, especially during the long winter months, and meat spoiled quickly without modern refrigeration. Salting, smoking, or pickling were the only ways to preserve it, and by the time it reached the table, the taste was far from appealing. Servants and lower-ranking residents had it even worse. Their diet was usually nothing more than coarse bread, thin stew, and weak ale, consumed day after day with little variety. Malnutrition was common, and the rich weren't exempt either. Overindulgence in heavy, greasy foods often led to painful digestive problems. Hunting was sometimes used to supplement meals, but it was risky, and the game caught was never enough to feed an entire castle. The image of endless feasting masks the reality: hunger, poor nutrition, and a constant struggle to make food last defined much of castle life. Living inside a castle meant living in a world of constant cold and shadows. The thick stone walls that look so impressive today worked well for defense, but they were terrible for comfort. In winter, the chill seeped through every crack, turning rooms into icy chambers, where even layers of furs couldn't keep people warm. Fireplaces were the only source of heat, but they only warmed the immediate area, leaving the rest of the room freezing. Smoke from these fires often filled the air, stinging the eyes and leaving a lingering smell in clothes and hair. Light was just as scarce. Windows were tiny, built for protection rather than beauty, and they were usually covered with wooden shutters or oiled cloth instead of glass. This meant most of the castle was left in dim light during the day and almost complete darkness at night. Candles and torches offered some brightness, but they were expensive and smoky, making them less practical for everyday use. Daily life was carried out in gloom, with people squinting to see and shivering to keep warm. The romantic glow we imagine around castle halls was often nothing more than flickering shadows on cold, bare stone. Life in a castle wasn't just uncomfortable, it was lived under the constant shadow of danger. Castles were built as fortresses, not cozy homes, and that meant everyone inside knew they could be attacked at any moment. Rival lords, raiding armies, or even angry peasants could lay siege, cutting off supplies and trapping entire families within the walls for weeks or months. Imagine the fear as food stores dwindled, water grew scarce, and sickness began to spread, all while enemy forces camped outside, waiting to starve the defenders into surrender. Even in quieter times, there was always the threat of betrayal or surprise raids, and watchmen had to keep their eyes on the horizon day and night. For the nobles, the castle symbolized power, but it was also a target, and for the servants and soldiers who lived there, it meant carrying the burden of defense, whether they liked it or not. The moats, drawbridges, and towers we admire today were not just architectural marvels. They were desperate necessities in a world where safety could vanish in a single night. Life behind castle walls wasn't peaceful security. It was an uneasy balance between protection and the ever-present risk of disaster. Disease was one of the darkest realities of castle life, and no one, not even the nobility, could escape it. With poor sanitation, crowded living spaces, and limited medical knowledge, illness spread like wildfire. Fleas, lice, and bedbugs were a daily torment, hiding in straw mattresses and clothing that was rarely washed. Rats thrived in storerooms and kitchens, feasting on scraps and spreading deadly plagues. When the Black Death swept across Europe, castles were no safer than villages. The sickness crept through the walls, taking lives in terrifying numbers. Even minor injuries could become life-threatening since medicine relied more on superstition than science.